Franco Zeffirelli is among the greatest directors of operas, plays and films of all time.
Good morning, Kate.
Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor were tamed in his first Shakespeare film. And 50 years on, his controversial and radical Romeo and Juliet is still among the most powerful of love stories.
Are you the Messiah, the Son of God?
His series Jesus of Nazareth remains the gold standard for religious depictions and featured 8 Oscar winners. Great actors worked with him on screen and stage, from Laurence Olivier to Judi Dench and Maggie Smith, and not least Olivier's wife, Joan Plowright.
He had talent bursting out of him, and electricity, a touch of genius.
But perhaps most of all, it is as a director of operas like Otello that Zeffirelli was at his best.
When Franco goes all the way, he's unbeatable. And those are magic moments, and they stay in your mind forever, you know.
Zeffirelli worked repeatedly with Placido Domingo and Maria Callas, perhaps last century's greatest actor-singers. Though they became friends, not everybody liked him, admired him, or could cope with his demands.
Franco is provocative, has absolutely got as many friends as enemies, and has riled people along the way, but you cannot take away the fact that this man is an incredible artist.
He is an artist in more ways than one. He designed all his own sets. And in 2017, the city of Florence gifted him a palazzo to house his thousands of drawings and costumes. Public and students alike can now view the range of his output: imaginative, naturalistic, and extravagant operatic worlds. He directed into his late 80s, but now his work is complete and he can look back on a 6-decade career. He turned 94 in February 2017, still the life and soul of the party. Many of Zeffirelli's artistic choices seem to stem from his early life in Florence, where he was born in 1923.
Franco's mother was a very famous fashion designer in Florence. She was a very beautiful woman, actually. She had 2 children with the husband, but at a certain moment the husband got very sick. For many years he was not able to perform the husband role because he couldn't have sex with the wife anymore.
So Franco was born out of wedlock. His father was a woolen merchant, and he lived with his mother, and when he was 6, his mother died.
He did speak about his mother one night, a child's memory from way back, but all he could remember really was the love, the emotion, and the love he felt for her, and the safety he felt with her, because, you know, he was illegitimate, and he was, I think, absolutely devastated when she was lost.
One of the obsessions of my father was that I should learn English. And he had an assistant, Miss Mary O'Neill, and he said to her, I want him to become absolutely like a perfect English gentleman.
She started educating him towards the English language, and when he started understanding the English language, little by little, he started, teaching Shakespeare.
Let's put the light back on the stage.
Zeffirelli's film, Tea with Mussolini, tells the story of his own childhood, and the toy theatre was how Shakespeare really came alive to him.
Lady, by yonder blessed moon I swear, that tips with splendor all these fruit tree tops.
Oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon, that monthly changes in her circled orbit, lest that of thy love prove likewise variable.
Romeo and Juliet was something that she insisted, because she said something so wonderful that has hit me for the rest of my life, is that I want you to know what love is early in your life, because love is from the moment you come on this earth and you see the light that God has given us. With that light there is love. So she insisted on this point, that love was the key of life.
He was unable to live with his father, and his Aunt Lida took him in and gave him the love he needed.
Everybody around her adored Franco. I mean, he had all the possible attention and the love that you can give to a child. But, I don't know what can happen to a child at that age when you are missing mother or a father affection.
During his teenage years, Mussolini took Italy into a war the young Franco could not support.
He got his call-up card. I think he was 18 at the time. And he ripped it up and went off to join the partisans on the hills behind Florence.
Zeffirelli's time with the anti-fascist resistance caused him to see the horrors of war at first hand. And sights like the hanging of 19 partisan collaborators on a line of trees in a Tuscan village affected him deeply enough to find its echoes in his later work. He went on to study architecture, but soon realized he was more interested in theatre sets than buildings.
When he came out from the war, he joined Luchino Visconti, who was much older than Franco, and was already a well-known director, and he became his assistant.
He learned the business, definitely. I mean, he was the best director those days that Italy had, and he was the head of the theatre, the Italian theatre. Done wonderful production, beautiful production. So it was a great school for Franco to learn, definitely.
Luchino was always looking for the moment where he could unload, open up this furnace of passion that he had within him. And as he was an outrageously powerful personality, an opportunity of shouting, bam, breaking things, apart, throwing china against the walls, breaking mirrors.
I like to think that Visconti saw a talented young man who could help him design the sets, as he got an architectural degree. And I suspect that Visconti was very attracted to Franco. And they certainly had a long relationship. They were partners.
Their affair was sexual and professional, and ended badly when a jealous Visconti threw Zeffirelli out after 5 years.
And I was so precious for him, because I was the assistant director in cinema, in theater, I was decorating, I was answering the phones, I was paying the bills, I was walking the dogs, I was doing everything. Out of my life. Yeah, take your dogs, go.
After he broke with Visconti, it was very difficult for him to start a career in Italy, because Visconti was sort of jealous of his qualities and so on. So that's when he decided to emigrate.
Zeffirelli came to London and soon built a reputation as a designer and then director of plays and operas. Throughout the 1950s, His opera designs won him recognition, though following Visconti's lead, he was keen to inject dramatic acting into the static delivery of most opera productions of the time, and in his own inimitable way.
Franco did a production at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, of Lucia di Lammermoor, with Joan Sutherland playing Lucia and Richard Bonning, her husband, conducting it.
Said, listen, we have to make clear, first of all, one thing, that I'm Italian. I'm of a detaching quality of people. I have to touch.
I was very naive, and he started pushing and pulling me about and said, we'll have to build these up.
I want to know how much, how do you call it, mammelle, mammaries, how do you call it in English? Bosom. And we manage by putting the false seduction instruments that women use.
But I was a bit embarrassed that he should be sort of a young man, sort of standing in front of all the people in the wardrobe, pushing me about in my, very personal parts.
He does make people do things that they think they can't do. She was used to looking at the conductor as she was singing right in the middle of the stage. And Franco said, no, this woman is mad. She has to run up and down the stage. She has to run up and down the steps. There were huge steps. Has to run up to the top of the steps and run down again. And I think for a whole day, that's all he did, was he had her in a long dress so that she would know what the costume was going to be like.
The extraordinary mad scene when she came down dragging the bloody bedspread and running back and forth, up, down and up the steps, producing the most extraordinary top notes. In the end, the audience was so taken, confused, and conquered by this phenomenal, dynamic mystery on stage that they were absolutely surrendered. And in the end, there were 19 minutes standing ovation.
Zeffirelli was building his own and his singers' careers by getting them to interpret an opera in their actions as well as their voices. He found a willing collaborator in the greatest soprano actress of the century, Maria Callas. They became close friends, and the Tosca they created at Covent Garden in 1964 was a landmark. But it came at a time when her career and voice were starting to pass their peak.
It was very difficult. At that point, she didn't want to sing anymore. And he had to insist a lot. And it was already the time of Onassis. Together with Onassis, he didn't want her to work, he didn't want her to do anything practically. But at the end, he convinced her to come back.
I remember the first day of rehearsal in the Covent Garden, the rehearsal room, and Maria, she cleared the table of all music and papers and everything. She said, now, it's clean. I want to start from scratch. Tell me how you see Tosca. I saw everything lit by warm light and cast shadows, black shadows everywhere. It's warm, at the same time it's threatening, it's an inferno. And that was my approach, visual and emotional, to that act. And the way she prays, she implores him with the lights. Very, very good stroke.
Mario, senti che io parli.
She stops everything and sings this aria. So she tears herself off and shows you how much she suffers. And the audience is there. It's the most a clever, dramatic stroke. And then, she decides to do it. He empties the glass, and then bringing it down, she sees the sparkle of the knife. And that was a long pause, the slowest movement, and all the audience was zoom on them, on that hand and the glass. And then she puts her hand on it. Tosca, finalmente mia. Muori, dannato, muori 3 times. Muori. She kills him in the end because she's afraid of becoming his mistress or whatever, abandon herself to him. So I explained to her this. She said, you mean, I know what you mean. Yes, sometimes I have that instinct of killing somebody. And she meant Onassis.
Callas had a son with Onassis, but he died as a baby, and Onassis deserted her. Perhaps in the unhappiness of his great friend, Zeffirelli heard echoes of the tragic life of the woman who was dearest to him.
Maria Callas had that kind of life, more or less like Franco's mother, with the same problems and the same suffering, actually. But their relation was purely creative and dedicated to work.
Zeffirelli's Tosca was Callas's final opera role. She never got over Onassis and died alone and depressed in 1977, aged 55.
He was very upset by the news. Mind you, he knew how ill she was, and that she was in despair, as we all learnt. He was very, very close, and he was sort of in love with her. It was a very difficult time for him.
Very good.
Zeffirelli would escape every summer to Positano on the Amalfi coast, staying at a villa he eventually bought.
He was always working. He worked wherever he went all the time. Things going on, new ideas. And there, I can remember so vividly being down at the beach and hearing this wonderful operatic music coming down. And it was because that would be his next project or a future project, and he'd be working on it. And he always played it while he sketched the costume designs and the sets and planned the moves. He would go to his library, which had something like 10,000 books in it. And then he would start sketching. Drew all the scenes, the crowds, everything. He drew everything. And that's how it came alive for him.
Zeffirelli would draw every set and costume in detail long before it went into production. And remarkably, the final stagings would always end up almost identical. In the early 1960s, his opera career was doing well, but he was also starting to stage Shakespeare plays in London, a brave move for a director from a different tradition.
To be able to come to London and produce a Shakespearean theatre, putting on stage Shakespeare as an Italian director, must have been extremely difficult, but he made it.
His biggest success was the play he'd been brought up on, a Romeo and Juliet with John Stride and Judi Dench, which, as usual, he both designed and directed.
I remember the first night of Romeo and Juliet, when the curtain went up, and Franco Zeffirelli had built that entire street and fountain and filled it all with dry ice. And it was just like very, very early morning in an extremely hot country. And the audience gasped. It was marvellous to be chosen so young to play Juliet. It was thrilling to work with Franco Zeffirelli. And I learnt an amazing amount during it.
Franco's genius as a director is to present the difficult as if it's simple. And when he did his celebrated Romeo and Juliet, we suddenly saw a transformation in English acting. I learned a tremendous amount simply from watching it.
Zeffirelli also staged Italian work, including by Eduardo de Filippo, whose play Saturday, Sunday, Monday allowed him to cement a friendship with Laurence Olivier and Joan Plowright.
He was very lovable, despite sort of problems of behaviour. I remember he walked out on us after a dress rehearsal because he thought we were not paying enough respect to the production and the play, and he stormed out of the theatre shouting, "The audience will teach you this play."
Oh, I saw tantrums from Franco on the set. Oh, he'd jump up and down and he'd, go raving mad. But, for me, that was the Italian temperament. And then afterwards, after he has a tantrum, he'll slap somebody on the bottom and say, "Coming for lunch."
Zeffirelli's volatility was becoming allied to a tendency for his concept to take primacy over his actors. His innovative presentation of Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing proved a case in point.
It was so Sicilian and so extraordinary, and it was so visual. And in the middle of all that, it was terribly difficult to be verbally funny. The dress rehearsal was such a shock. You went on and suddenly found everything happening all over, and you just thought, I don't know how I can just stand and talk. I longed very much to play the coffee boy, in actual fact.
The production was, however, a hit with the public, and also with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, whose tempestuous nature matched Zeffirelli's own.
I was told that Richard went backstage. He was in such a state of envy and fury. He said, "Bastards, you do theatre and they're crucified to movies in Hollywood and all of that. I would give my right arm to work with the director."
Burton had been longing to do another Shakespeare, and they got along very, very well. I mean, Franco teased Elizabeth, just like he teased me and teased everybody. And he just loved talking about Shakespeare with Burton, and they just became great friends.
I had great fun, actually, great fun, because I was not taken off guard by them. They were playing all the time, very dirty tricks, They were putting up great dramas all the time, just for their own amusement. Sometimes it was true, but I enjoyed every minute. I remember in the middle of some big quarrels, they would turn to me and say, "Why do you smile?" I said, "Because I enjoy it."
Now, Kate, I'm a husband for your choice. But by this light, where may I see thy beauty that doth make me like thee well?
Monstrous villain!
Thou must be married to no man but me.
He's very persuasive and very charming. You say, "Come on, you can do this. Come on, come on." I mean, he had Elizabeth Taylor doing amazing things that, she'd never been asked to do before in her life. And she loved it. She loved it.
Call you me daughter? Now, I promise you have showed a tender fatherly regard to wish me wed to one half lunatic, a madcap, ruffian, and a swearing jack who thinks with oaths to face the matter out.
Franco found it very frustrating where other people came up with things that were not in his imagination, which he hadn't created. And a perfect example of this is that Elizabeth Taylor on The Taming of the Shrew came out wearing a dress designed by Irene Sharaff. And Elizabeth had used Irene Sharaff for years and years and years in Hollywood. And this dress, I can remember it vividly, it was kind of pale green and there were huge bows all over it. And Franco looked at Elizabeth and said, "I don't think you can wear that dress." And she said, "Oh, I love the dress. Irene, designed it specially for me." And there was a bit of a do about that. And the bows were removed.
Oh, go hang yourself, you foul, loathsome swine! Oh!
This is Leicester Square in London, the setting for the world premiere of The Taming of the Shrew.
The film was a big hit and was honoured by British royalty turning out to watch Hollywood royalty in action.
Princess Margaret is the royal patron.
Any feelings of humility Zeffirelli may have suffered because of this were forestalled by a missive from his father enclosing documents which seemed to prove that they had a famous ancestor of their own.
And the letter my father was, "If tomorrow evening you are going to be received by a descendant of the Windsors, don't be ashamed, keep your head high, because in your veins runs the blood of Leonardo da Vinci."
Leonardo's possible descendant then turned to film the Shakespeare play that had meant most to him since he was a boy. And this time, the lovers were not much older than children themselves.
Virtually unknown in the world of film until they were discovered and brought to Rome by Franco Zeffirelli to play the roles of the two most exciting lovers ever created, Romeo and Juliet. No ordinary love story.
The successful of Romeo and Juliet was because for the first time in the movie history, he had chosen two kids close to the real age of Romeo and Juliet. Before that time, Romeo and Juliet were always performed by established actors. So established actors meant Juliet of 30, 35, Romeo of the same age of 40.
Franco Zeffirelli was now working on a principle he was to apply repeatedly in his films. Get the stars to look right to fit his overall concept, and the acting can be honed later.
I think it was largely looks, yes. It was the absolute image he wanted, and believed that he could extract some kind of performance from them.
Lady, by yonder blessed moon, I swear.
Oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon, that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest that thy love prove likewise variable.
I think the kids cried and loved Romeo and Juliet not because the dresses were beautiful, but just because the heart of the characters was opening to them a word of revelations. In Russia, they cut it. In Russia, Romeo and Juliet, my picture, has been the greatest foreign hit ever, but they cut that scene. And I remember when I showed it at the Kremlin to thousands of people, I had several screenings, a lot of people were covering their eyes when they got to that scene, and many of them, they regretted. They said, "Why did you put that? We are not prepared for it." I said, "Well, you're prepared to go in a museum and see two magnificent naked bodies. You never get a shock. It's the eyes of the beholder."
Good night. Good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be morrow.
After all, I mean, it was a beautiful movie, and it is a beautiful movie even still today. So it became a big hit, and it was the time of the hippie in those days.
The summer of love had just happened. Easy Rider was promising freedom, youth culture was blossoming, Romeo and Juliet hit the zeitgeist full on, winning 2 Oscars in 1969, and Hollywood beckoned for the new star director.
I think he would love to have become a big Hollywood director, but I think the films he made were not subjects that Hollywood would make a great mountain out of. He was very clever at choosing subjects that hadn't been done before and doing them beautifully so that he introduced Shakespeare to a new audience. But I mean, Shakespeare is never going to compete with Hollywood blockbusters.
They always offered him a lot of productions, a lot of ideas, but he never accepted anything, you know. I remember after Romeo and Juliet, they came along to offer him a Godfather. But because they offered him, he said no. And that's when Coppola came along.
He didn't want to get caught up, and he said, it's too incestuous. I want to go home. We were actually, after that, we did have a deal with the studio, but Franco didn't want to stay on in Hollywood. He wanted to get back to Italy.
An Italian producer had approached him at the time because he wanted to do something with Zeffirelli after the success of Romeo and Juliet. So Franco came up with the idea of doing Dante's Inferno. It's part of his culture, Florentine, Dante, which is very important to all of us. It's like Shakespeare for the English and so on. Franco had prepared all the vision of the film with the sketches, the notes of directions and so on.
The producers failed to come up with the funds to produce the film, so Zeffirelli's remarkable drawings were left in a folder, gathering dust. Until late 2017, no one had seen them. Now they have their own room in his foundation, animated to present an idea of what might have been. Purgatory and religion were now in Zeffirelli's thoughts. He directed the film Brother Sun, Sister Moon, about the young life of St. Francis of Assisi, and then nearly died in a car driven by the actress Gina Lollobrigida.
Because of the accident, really, Franco became more religious in a way. In fact, immediately after, he decided to make Jesus of Nazareth. So he dedicated himself in 5 years to religious movies.
2 years of filming started in 1975, and though his star was again cast for his looks, in Robert Powell he found an actor of no small ability.
Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
I mean, I wish I would have been around him, you know, hear him preaching and following what he was doing. It was fascinating. One, perhaps the most important location of the whole picture is the crucifixion site, where normal people were crucified at the time, which was not, as we think, on a little hill against a cloudy sky, was right outside the city gates. Actually, I'll show you something here. Now, when they arrived with the crosspiece, with a ladder, they were pulled up and hooked to the vertical, and they put their feet on a kind of little platform here. And at that point, they were either left tied, or they were tied and nailed. They were never nailed, only.
He consulted rabbis and you know, priests, and the amount of research that he did in preparation for doing Jesus of Nazareth, that I think was a very beautiful piece of work. It was tremendous.
We were also monitored all the time by, we had representatives of the Jewish faith and representatives of the Catholic faith on set all the time. My brief when I played Jesus of Nazareth was a very simple one, was to tell a story the way people believed it to be, not the way I believed it to be, or necessarily anybody else believed it to be that I was working with, but the way that 500 million people who were going to see it, the way they believed it to be. And on that level, Franco created a masterpiece. Franco's drawings, his storyboard, I've got copies of them. They are the most extraordinary thing. They were all done way before it was cast or anything like that. And it is exactly, the storyboard is exactly the way what you see in the film. And he did these way before we started shooting. It's uncanny. He was obsessed with the look. One day I remember we had a particularly wonderful cloud sun effect. And Franco said, get him up, I want to see this, get him on the cross. So I'm up there after about 5 minutes, I'm there. I said, right. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, do everything. And I said, he said, Robert, just do all the words. Just leave a little gap and then do the next one. And I said, okay.
John. Behold your mother.
And then we reached the point where I'm supposed to die. So I left it. I got to get myself together. And I hear his voice from down below. He said, come on, Robert, die. And I said, and somewhere in the rushes is a piece of film where Jesus looks around and goes, all right. And then quietly dies.
Jesus of Nazareth won 6 BAFTA nominations and an Emmy, leading Zeffirelli back into movies with the slushy romance Endless Love and boxing remake The Champ. Critical failures both. He went back to his beloved Positano.
He loved his home, he loved his work, he loved his friends, and he loved his animals. And you've no idea how many dogs I brought from England. And these dogs just ran all over the house and the garden. And it just seemed natural to him, really. And he loved life.
Where he loved and respected, he really did deeply love and respect. And he was very generous to friends.
Chi vuole vino?
Franco seemed to me that he would have liked to have been the father of a family. But I guess having people around, having the cast of whatever he was working on, was the alternative family that he chose.
In fact, Zeffirelli did form his own family by adopting 2 young men, Luciano and Pippo, who are still with him.
In a boat once coming back from an island where we'd all been eating, and I had the child in my arms, he was just sitting opposite of the boat, and he just started, the tears were coming down his eyes, and I felt that he was probably going back to the mother who left him, who died when he was a boy, and how much of an effect that had had on him.
It is hard to know how far thoughts of his mother impinged on his work, but it might be imagined from the operas he chose to direct repeatedly.
Anyway, he's good to La Bohème.
Puccini's La Bohème features a young heroine who dies tragically of consumption, like his mother. Verdi's La Traviata also features a young heroine dying of consumption, this time wronged by her lover. It was a role he created for Maria Callas, but when he came to make a film of it in 1982, she was dead, and he cast another Greek soprano, Teresa Stratos.
The problem was that she didn't want to be related to Maria, not because she hated Maria, she admired Maria, but, as an artist, she didn't want to be, stressed with that name. It became a big stress. In fact, she went on to a huge crisis and she left the set one day. And then the producer was Tarak Ben Ammar, went to pick her up with the private plane from Paris and bring her back to Rome.
Under Zeffirelli's direction, Teresa Stratos triumphed, and with its sumptuous sets and performances, the film underlined Zeffirelli's mastery of opera.
The famous opera singer, they are not so many. We don't have thousands of famous opera singers, so I've seen them working with different directors, but the energy and the attention they had with Franco, they had with nobody else.
In 1983, Teresa Stratos played Nedda in a film of the opera I Pagliacci. This time, the role was an unfaithful wife meeting an untimely end, perhaps another subconscious echo of Zeffirelli's mother. Again, the setting was spectacular, and the director was not afraid to innovate.
This Pagliacci with Zeffirelli, this is quite a different production. It's a live performance, but then we went to the studio and we did some filming. So it's a combination of performance in the opera house and studio filming. It's this kind of atmosphere of the circus, which is everything apparently so happy and everything so sad. All these clowns doing 1,000 things, so all these mirrors changing, lights, everything is dangerous. It's like the Joker in the films of Batman in a way, and it's like in Cabaret, so it's this kind of happiness, and it's not really happiness.
The critical success of these opera films led to Zeffirelli being offered a big budget to direct his next one in 1986, Verdi's Otello, based on the Shakespeare play.
I think Otello was the perfect movie for him, because you got everything there. There is a wonderful way of directing the singers, great costume designer, wonderful sets. Shakespeare was there, Verdi was there. So I think Otello really is all the qualities of Franco in that movie.
Qua, fermi! All'azione, questi, these, they must climb up. Across with the others.
Andiamo, motore!
By coincidence, it again features an innocent young wife who dies. And again, it stars a hero who precipitates her death, played, as in all his opera films, by the tenor Placido Domingo.
Franco said several times that Placido Domingo is the male version of Callas as a complete artist, because not only had a beautiful voice, but he was a wonderful actor.
There is not such a thing as film opera. There are certain operas that you can transpose onto the movie medium, and not many, I promise you. And what I'm trying to say is that there is not a general rule that you can transpose all operas into cinema.
Otello was his last and his most admired opera film. But Zeffirelli remained prolific on the stage, his productions getting more and more spectacular and staying in major opera houses' repertoires for decades. Bizet's Carmen features another unfaithful heroine who dies.
This Carmen with Zeffirelli has been a production that has been going at the Staatsoper in Vienna, still going on. There are things that are difficult to beat, and that Carmen really is something, unforgettable. The whole production just was amazing. The costumes, the colors, the choreography. We have a Spanish dancer coming with that orchestra playing. You have never seen a reaction. Sometimes you see a reaction like this because of a soprano aria, tenor aria, but to have after the chanson Bohème, this is unbelievable. Those are magic moments and they stay in your mind forever, And when Franco goes all the way, he's unbeatable.
Zeffirelli was at his peak as an opera director, but his returns to film were less successful. Amid modest reactions to his Hamlet and Jane Eyre, he turned to stories taken from real lives he knew. Of the young Toscanini, the supreme opera conductor of the previous generation, whom he had met when he was young. Also featuring his old friend Elizabeth Taylor. Of the greatest of his opera friends, Maria Callas, whose whole professional life played out like a drama. And also, in 1999, his own childhood.
Oh, look! Look at that ridiculous American monstrosity they've given the child. It's amazing, they can even vulgarize ice cream.
We'd had a script from John Mortimer, which was perfectly all right. Franco then translated that into Italian for the crew, and then somebody translated that back into English, so that the final script had gone through a first draft in English, a draft in Italian, and then the third English was, I think, had been done more or less by Franco himself, and was not really all that good. I remember having a line which said, "This is jealousy you are talking." And I thought, who on earth has written that line? So I changed quite a few of my lines.
The green-eyed monster.
I think Franco's problem as a film director was his attempts at screenwriting. I think he was best when he was given the script. Romeo and Juliet, Taming of the Shrew,
Many thought Zeffirelli made another misstep when he accepted an invitation from Silvio Berlusconi, who owned the villa Zeffirelli lives in, to become a senator for the centre-right Forza Italia party. He held this position for 7 years, until 2001, but he later castigated the government for failing to support the arts. However, his politics did not increase his popularity in the world of opera or of theatre, to which he returned in 2003. It was also a return to a playwright whose work he had directed before, Luigi Pirandello, and his first production for the London stage in 25 years. Aged 80, He worked as always, first creating his designs. This time they were innovative and symbolic.
When I saw the design and the plans, it was clear to me this was not going to be, in any sense, a traditional piece of theatre. And it's an absolute work of art, the design. In fact, it's the only thing I have up on my wall. And it was all illusion, it was all mirrors, obviously the play. It's a Pirandello play, which deals with truth and illusion, and you can't believe what you see. And so the design completely mirrored, reflected the symbolism in the play.
Not for the first time, he was accused of prioritizing his concepts over actors' performances.
My eyes were beginning to be not good, to say the least. And when I saw the mirrored floor and realised light was going to be reflecting up to my eyes from everywhere, I was absolutely appalled.
I think she found negotiating that mirrored set really complex. I mean, anybody would. But Franco, even though he knew it was going to be difficult for the actors to work on, wouldn't change a thing of the design.
He was not madly interested in the interpretation of the actors. He was dealing a bit with them as puppets.
Whatever the performers thought, his designs were never less than breathtaking, often extravagant and naturalistic riots of colour and detail. Through his 80s, he produced at the Verona Arena, though finally he was slowing down.
He's been able to do opera productions. Yes, they are much more compact and easier for him to make. Though they require a lot of preparation, but it's a slow preparation within a year, 2 years. Then to put it on set and to make it happen, it's just 1 month work.
By now, however, after 60 years of designing operas, his naturalistic style was bringing accusations of being old-fashioned, as modernized and symbolic stagings were becoming more in vogue.
To realize Turandot, okay, you can do Turandot, you can update it. If the update gives a symbol of the story that is stronger than the natural or naturalistic realization of it. But if this updating or transformation doesn't enhance the meaning of the piece, which is the relation between the characters, they have each other, or the story itself, it's useless. But the management today, and some directors and all of that, they don't care about the story, they care about the scoop on the news.
Whatever design style was du jour, Zeffirelli continued creating his own kind of spectacular sets. His last production was Don Giovanni at Verona in 2012. In his 90s, Franco Zeffirelli can no longer work, and the book of his career is closed. But there is little satisfaction in this.
I see that he suffers when he can't express the big energy and the sensibility he has inside. So I see he's there, and also I see that he suffers because he can't express what he has inside. Because he's a young and beautiful and fascinating soul in an old body now. So that's the point.
He spends a lot of time watching the nature outside in his garden, and occasionally he says, look at the beauty, look at the moon, look at the trees, the flowers. And it can happen one of these days I'm not going to be able to see anything of that anymore. So he's afraid of dying. He's afraid of losing his being.
I think it's very difficult for Franco because in one way he's deeply religious and in other ways he ignores the way of life that should mean. I'm sure there's a kind of small boy imagination of standing at the pearly gates and being refused entry. Because that would be Franco.